June 6, 1944. 0:15 hours. 500 feet above the Cotentin Peninsula, France. The roar of the C-47 Skytrain's twin engines is a physical weight, vibrating through the metal floor and into the bones of Private First Class Silas Thorne. Inside the darkened fuselage, the air is thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid, unwashed wool, and the metallic tang of nervous sweat. Silas grips his M1 Garand so tightly, his knuckles are bone white. Around him, 17 other men of the 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, sit in 2 rows, their faces blackened with burnt cork and linseed oil. Suddenly, the red light near the jump door flickers to life. A jagged burst of flak tears through the cloud bank below, a dull thump, thump, thump that sends a shudder through the plane's airframe. "Stand up and hook up," the jumpmaster shouts over the wind. The rhythmic clack, clack, clack of 18 static lines snapping onto the overhead cable echoes like a drum roll. Silas feels the slipstream screaming past the open door. Below, the Atlantic wall is waking up. Tracers, vibrant greens and searing reds, arc lazily through the midnight sky, looking like lethal Christmas lights. The pilot, desperate to avoid the intensifying anti-aircraft fire, begins to bank and dive. Green light! Go! 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 Silas is shoved forward by the weight of the men behind him. He steps into the void. For a second, there is only the terrifying roar of the wind and the buffeting of the prop blast. Then, a violent jerk as his parachute snaps open. He is suspended in a chaotic symphony of fire. Beneath his dangling boots, Normandy is a patchwork of dark hedgerows and flooded marshes. He can see the flashes of German 88mm guns firing from the coast, aimed not at him, but at the horizon, where the largest armada the world has ever seen is currently emerging from the mist. He isn't alone. Over 11,000 aircraft are saturating the skies, dropping 13,000 paratroopers into the heart of occupied France. Their mission: seize the causeways, blow the bridges, and sow enough confusion to ensure that when the sun rises, the men on the beaches have a fighting chance. Silas hits the ground hard in a flooded field near Sainte-Mère-Église, the weight of his 80-pound pack nearly pinning him beneath the rising water. He fumbles for his cricket clicker, pressing the metal tongue. Click-clack. From the darkness of a nearby tree line, a response. Click-clack, click-clack. The invasion has begun. But while the paratroopers fight for their lives in the inland shadows, a few miles to the north, nearly 7,000 vessels are cutting through the heavy swells of the English Channel. On the deck of the USS Augusta, Admiral Kirk watches the ticking clock. The deception of Operation Bodyguard has worked. The German High Command still believes the blow will fall at Pas-de-Calais. But as the first gray light of dawn begins to bleed into the sky, the silhouette of the Normandy coast hardens. The time for trickery is over. The time for steel has arrived. June 6, 1944, 5:30 hours, 10 miles off the coast of Sector Omaha. The English Channel is a churning graveyard of whitecaps and diesel fumes. On the deck of a landing craft vehicle personnel, LCVP, Sergeant Anthony Tony Moretti of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, watches the bow of the boat slam into a 6-foot swell. Icy seawater sprays over the ramp, soaking the 32 men huddled inside. The Higgins boat groans, its flat bottom slapping the surface like a palm against concrete. To Moretti's port side, the horizon is no longer empty. It is a forest of steel. Battleships like the USS Texas and HMS Warspite loom out of the morning haze, their massive 14-inch guns elevated toward the shore. Suddenly, the world shatters. The Texas unleashes a full broadside. The shockwave is a physical punch to the chest. in a roar so profound it seems to flatten the waves themselves. Then comes the response. From the distant, looming bluffs of Pointe du Hoc and the Omaha draws, the German batteries of the 352nd Infantry Division spit back. Geysers of water, hundreds of feet high, erupt between the bobbing landing craft as the Atlantic wall begins to roar. "Check your chin straps," Moretti bellows, his voice barely audible over the thunder of the naval bombardment. "Keep your heads down. You don't see anything until that ramp drops." The men around him are a tableau of grim resolve and visceral fear. Some are vomiting into their helmets. Others are gripped in a silent, wide-eyed stare, clutching rosary beads or greasy Lucky Charms. They are less than 3 miles from a beach code-named Omaha, a crescent-shaped death trap overlooked by 100-foot cliffs. Unknown to Moretti, the Allied air bombardment intended to soften these defenses has failed. Heavy cloud cover forced the bombers to delay their releases by seconds, just enough to drop their payloads miles inland, leaving the German pillboxes and Tobruk's entirely intact. As the LCVP's engine revs, pushing the craft toward the surf zone, the big red one isn't heading toward a cleared beach. They are heading into a calibrated kill zone of MG-42 machine guns, capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The shoreline is a jagged mess of Rommel's asparagus. Steel hedgehogs and teller mines strapped to wooden poles, designed to gut any boat that dares to land at high tide. The coxswain maneuvers the Higgins boat through the obstacles, the metal hull scraping against a submerged pylon. "1 minute!" the coxswain yells, his hand white on the tiller. The naval guns shift their fire inland to avoid hitting their own troops. For a heartbeat, there is a haunting, unnatural silence, broken only by the whistling of the wind and the slap of the tide. Then, the first German machine gun bullet pings off the front ramp. Then another. Then a rhythmic tearing sound, the Hitler's buzzsaw, begins to rip through the air from the heights above. "Get ready!" Moretti screams, bracing his shoulder against the side. "Move fast or die! Move fast or—" The ramp drops. June 6th, 1944. 6:35 hours. Dog White Sector, Omaha Beach. The ramp falls with a heavy metallic thud, and the world turns into a whirlwind of lead and salt spray. Before Sergeant Moretti can even draw a breath to yell a command, the first 3 men in line are erased. The German MG-42s, positioned in the wider stands nest, resistance nests on the bluffs, have the ramps bore-sided. Bullets stitch across the front of the boat, turning the interior into a slaughterhouse of ricocheting steel and splintered wood. "Over the side! Over the side!" Moretti screams, lunging over the gunwale into the freezing, waist-deep water. He plunges into the surf, the weight of his gear pulling him toward the sandy bottom. To his left, an LCVP hits a mine. The explosion is a white-hot flash that vaporizes the front of the craft, sending debris and bodies raining into the surf. Moretti struggles to his feet, gasping as the brine fills his lungs. Around him, the water is turning a sickening, opaque pink. The beach is a 200-yard gauntlet of exposed sand. There is no cover except for the hedgehogs, the rusted iron crosses the Germans planted to stop tanks. Moretti see Private First Class Miller, a 19-year-old replacement, frozen behind a steel obstacle, his eyes wide and vacant as bullets kick up sand like miniature geysers all around him. "Move, Miller. You stay there. You're a corpse." Moretti grabs Miller by the webbing of his vest and drags him toward the shingle, a high bank of smooth stones at the base of the bluffs that offers the only sliver of protection from the direct fire. They scramble over the bodies of the first wave, He's dodging the wreckage of Donald Duck tanks, amphibious Shermans that foundered in the heavy swells and now sit submerged. Their crews drowned or cut down as they tried to swim for shore. By 7:30, the situation is catastrophic. General Omar Bradley, watching from the USS Augusta, seriously considers aborting the landing at Omaha and diverting the follow-up waves to the British sectors. The American troops are pinned to the narrow strip of shale, their radios waterlogged, their officers dead, and their units hopelessly intermingled. But then, a shift in the chaos. Two destroyers, the USS Satterlee and the USS Thompson, seeing the carnage, defy orders and steam dangerously close to the shore, scraping their hulls on the sand, and they level their 5-inch guns at point-blank range and begin to systematically core out the German concrete bunkers. At the shingle, Brigadier General Norman Dutch Cota, a man with a cigar clamped in his teeth and a death wish in his eyes, walks upright through the fire. He looks at the huddle of shivering men. Two kinds of people are staying on this beach, Cota bellows. Those who are dead and those who are gonna die. Now let's get the hell out of here. Engineers, working with plastic explosives under a hail of sniper fire, finally blow a gap in the barbed wire and the anti-tank seawall. Moretti sees the opening. He doesn't wait for an order. He slams a fresh clip into his Garand, feels the cold Atlantic water dripping from his uniform, and begins the scramble up the crumbling face of the bluff. They aren't just fighting for a beach anymore. They are fighting for the very breath in their lungs. June 6th, 1944. 8:15 hours. Gold Beach, near Arromanches. While Omaha is a charnel house of blood and shale, 7 miles to the east, the British and Canadian sectors present a different, though no less violent, spectacle. On Gold Beach, Sergeant Major Stan Hollis of the Green Howards leaps from his landing craft into a chaotic tangle of smoke and thunder. Unlike the Americans at Omaha, the British have brought Hobart's Funnies, specialized Churchill tanks equipped with massive chains to flail the ground and detonate mines, or bobbin tanks that unroll canvas carpets over soft sand. The air here smells of cordite and the salt-heavy mist of the English Channel. Hollis feels the crunch of the Funnies clearing paths through the dunes. But the German resistance is stubborn. From a thick-walled pillbox at the edge of a coastal village, the MG-42 begins to traverse the beach, pinning down Hollis's company. Without waiting for armored support, Hollis charges. He sprints across 30 yards of open ground, the air snapping with the crack thump of supersonic rounds passing his ears. He reaches the pillbox, jams his Sten gun through the vision slit, and empties the magazine. When that doesn't silence the position, he climbs onto the roof and drops a grenade down the ventilation shaft. The muffled whoomp is followed by a plume of gray dust, and the sector falls into a localized, ringing silence. To the east, at Juno Beach, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division is hitting the shore with a ferocity that stuns the German defenders. The tide is rising fast, concealing the deadly hedgehogs. Landing craft are being impaled and flipped, forcing Canadian soldiers to swim through a hail of lead. Despite taking nearly 50% casualties in the first waves, the Canadians do not falter. They sprint past the seawalls and into the streets of Courseulles-sur-Mer, engaging in brutal, room-to-room fighting with bayonets and grenades. By mid-morning, the British at Sword Beach have linked up with the 6th Airborne Division, who had captured Pegasus Bridge in a daring glider assault hours earlier. The plan is working, but it is a race against time. Farther inland, the landscape of Normandy, the Bocage, presents a new nightmare. The fields are bordered by ancient hedgerows, thick earthen mounds topped with centuries of tangled hawthorn and oak roots, some 10 feet high. Every field is a natural fortress. German snipers and anti-tank teams from the 21st Panzer Division are already maneuvering through these green tunnels. "Keep the momentum," Hollis shouts, waving his men toward the high ground. "If we stop, we're dead. Push for Bayeux." The Allies are no longer just on the beach. They are clawing their way into the heart of France, one hedgerow and one village at a time. But the German Grey Wolves, the Panzer reinforcements, are finally beginning to stir from their inland bivouacs. And the real test of the Second Front is about to begin. June 6th, 1944. 1400 hours. The calm Bayeux Road. The sun is high, yet the sky remains choked with the black plumes of burning fuel and the white streaks of Allied fighter bombers. 10 miles inland from the beaches, the pastoral silence of the French countryside is shattered by the rhythmic, metallic clatter of the Wehrmacht's counterpunch. Colonel Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, stands in the turret of his command vehicle, staring through binoculars. To the north, the horizon is a shimmering haze of Allied naval gunfire. He has spent the morning in a state of murderous frustration. Because of the Allied deception campaign, the German High Command and Hitler himself, who slept late at the Berghof, initially dismissed the Normandy reports as a feint. For the critical golden hour to throw the invaders back into the sea has passed. Finally, von Luck mutters as the order comes through from the 21st Panzer Division. Attack! The German panzers, camouflaged with branches and netting to hide from the prowling P-47 Thunderbolts, begin to roll toward the gap between the British at Sword Beach and the Canadians at Juno. Their goal is simple: reach the coast, split the Allied line, and roll up the beachheads. The clash occurs near the village of Le Bessay. British infantry, supported by Sherman tanks, suddenly find themselves staring down the long barrels of Panzer IVs and the terrifying 88mm guns. The air fills with the smell of scorched metal and the high-pitched whine of armor-piercing shells. "Tank, right front!" screams a British gunner. The Sherman's 75mm gun barks, but the shell glances off the sloped glacis plate of the lead German tank. The Panzer returns fire with clinical precision. The Sherman erupts into a Ronson lighter, flames licking the sky as the crew scrambles from the hatches. However, the Germans are fighting a ghost they cannot kill: the Allied Air Force. Every time a Panzer platoon moves into the open, the sky screams. Rocket-firing typhoons dive from the clouds, their wings spitting fire. The German columns are hammered by 60-pound rockets that flip 30-ton tanks like toys. Von Luck watches as his momentum dies under the weight of Allied Jabos, fighter bombers. By late afternoon, the 21st Panzer Division has reached within sight of the sea. They can see the masts of the British fleet. But they are too depleted to hold the ground. They are forced to dig in, creating a steel ring around the city of Caen. The fortress Europe has been breached, but it has not collapsed. The German defenders realize that while the beaches were lost, the war will be won or lost in the claustrophobic labyrinth of the bocage. The Allies have a foothold, but the longest day is far from over for the men trapped in the tall grass. June 6th, 1944. 2100 hours. The heights above Omaha Beach. The sun begins to dip toward the Atlantic horizon, casting long, bruised shadows over a landscape transformed. The deafening roar of the morning has settled into a low, rhythmic thrum, the sound of a world-shaping machine in motion. Sergeant Moretti stands at the crest of the bluff, where 14 hours earlier, German gunners had looked down with murderous impunity. His uniform is stiff with dried salt, and his face is masked in a layer of fine gray dust. But he is alive. Behind him, the big red one has cleared the draws. Below, on the beach once called Bloody Omaha, the chaos is being replaced by a staggering display of logistical might. The tide has receded, revealing the skeletal remains of landing craft and the dark, silent shapes of the fallen. But between them, and the Seabees and engineers are already at work. Massive, mulberry artificial harbors, giant concrete caissons towed across the channel, are being positioned to turn this open coastline into a functioning port. WW amphibious trucks swarm the shallows like beetles, ferrying tons of ammunition and crates of sea rations to the base of the cliffs. By the numbers, the achievement is incomprehensible. Over 150,000 men are now on French soil. The British have pushed toward Caen. The Canadians have carved out a deep wedge at Juneau. And at Utah Beach, the 4th Infantry Division has linked up with the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st, securing the vital causeways through the flooded marshes. Yet, for the men on the ground, the victory is quiet and heavy. Silas Thorne, the paratrooper who dropped into the dark at midnight, sits on a stone wall in the village of Sainte-Mère-Église. He shares a tin of cold meat with a French farmer who has emerged from his cellar with a bottle of cider and tears in his eyes. They cannot speak each other's language. But as the farmer points to the tricolor flag hidden for 4 years and now pinned to a doorway, the meaning is clear. The cost of this single day is written in the sand. Over 10,000 Allied casualties, including 4,414 confirmed dead. For the Germans, the losses are equally grim, compounded by the realization that the impregnable Atlantic Wall was breached in a matter of hours. As darkness falls on June 6th, the Allies do not celebrate. They clean their rifles. They mourn their squad mates. They watch the inland tree lines where the muzzle flashes of German snipers still wink in the dark. Operation Neptune is a success. The second front is open, and Hitler's Fortress Europe has a gaping hole in its side. The road to Paris, the Rhine, and Berlin is long and paved with the battles of the Bocage yet to come. But the momentum of history has shifted. The beginning of the end has finally begun.